Okay, we're going to jump in today talking about chord types. So we've already covered two different types of chords, which were major and minor. But there's a lot of other chord types as well, and we're going to go ahead and talk about those here in a minute. But first, let's do a quick refresher on major and minor because those two are the most common. So a major chord is just going to be 1, 3, and 5. And you can just count that. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Now, the one thing to be aware of is that the major third should be 4 half steps above the first note. Okay, so for example, if I count this, I have 1, 2, 3, 4 half steps. So that checks out. That's a C major. But if I go somewhere else, like say E, this actually isn't E major because I only have 3 half steps. Check this out. 1, 2, 3. So to make that E major, I need 4 half steps. 1, 2, 3, 4. There's my major third. So that's our major chord, and the minor chord is just 1, flat 3, and 5. Now remember that flat doesn't mean black key necessarily, it just means I'm lowering the major third. So watch this, here's my E major, which has G sharp in the middle of it, this black key here. Now I'm going to flat or lower that third, and I get E minor. Hopefully that makes sense. If you forgot any of that, go back and check out my video on major and minor chords. But now let's keep on going and let's talk about some of the other chord types out there. So the next type of chord we want to talk about is a diminished chord. And what we do is we can start with a major chord, say C major, but instead of 1, 3, 5, it's going to be 1, flat 3, and flat 5. So that's the diminished chord, 1, flat 3, and flat 5. And you'll notice it's basically a minor chord, which has the flat 3 in it, but we've also flatted the 5th as well. So another example might be if I go to E minor. Alright, if you know your E minor, you've already got the 1, the flat 3, and the 5. Now to make it diminished, I'm going to flat that 5th from B to B flat. And there we have it, 1, flat 3, and flat 5. That would be E diminished. Diminished chords are typically used to add tension, right? So it's not the most pleasant sound. So that might be in a classical piece, maybe we're going from C minor to B diminished, back to C minor, something like that. Or you could also have it in passing, right? So the diminished chord can sort of be a transitional chord. If I go, here's the C diminished. So to me that's sort of a singer-songwriter-y sound. Elton John does that kind of thing, Disney does that kind of thing. But yeah, just sort of passing to a diminished chord right here, and then resolving it. The next type of chord we're going to cover is an augmented chord. So an augmented chord is a major chord, but with a sharp 5th. So it's sort of the opposite of diminished. Instead of minor chords with a flat 5, this is a major chord with a sharp 5. So I'll show you what I mean. I'm going to do my major chord, but I'm going to sharp that 5th. So here's C, E, and G sharp, or in other words, 1, 3, and sharp 5. And that is an augmented chord. Let's do another example. For D major, I would start right here, 1, 3, and 5. Then to make it an augmented chord, I would sharp that 5th. So I get 1, 3, and sharp 5. And augmented chords typically give you a more dreamy, sort of outer spacey sound, and you get this kind of feeling. So these are all augmented chords. And that's sort of just using them back to back, which obviously sounds a little weird. But you can also do them within the context of a certain song as a passing chord, just like the diminished chords did, right? Just sort of a quick little passing flavor. So for example, maybe I'll go from C major to C augmented to A minor, that kind of thing. Alright, so we heard that augmented chord right in the middle of it before resolving. And another way I could resolve it is going from that same C augmented to maybe a D flat major. So that gives you a sort of Debussy feel if I go from here and I go there. It's sounds really nice. And don't worry if you're not tracking along with every exact thing I'm doing there, that's not really the point. I'm just sort of trying to get you to hear the sound of these chords, right? I'm noodling around, showing you examples. So the application side of it, that comes later. For now, we're just focusing on how to make these chords. We're not worried about all the stuff that comes after that. And the next chord we're going to talk about is something called a sus2. And sus in this case is short for suspended, not suspicious, because I know that's like the lingo right now. But yeah, so sus is suspended, and what that means is I'm going to take my third and suspend or move it to a different note. In this case, I'm going to take 3 and move it down to 2. Okay, so there's my sus2, which is 1, 2, and 5. Then a sus4, on the other hand, would be 1, 4, and 5. So in both cases, that 3 took a change there, right? We changed it to either 2 or 4. Another example might be if I go to F major, here's sus2, and here's sus4. And you'll notice that B flat there. The reason I'm doing that is because I have to get to a 4th, right? And that's going to come from our scale. If I forget my scale, the spacing doesn't really work out the right way. So this wouldn't be a proper sus4 chord. Right? That sounds really different, it sounds really nasty. And that's just because I forgot my scale. And that ties back into like the second ever video I made where I said never forget your scales, right? That's going to guide everything that we do. Another example would be if I'm in the key of E. Here's my E scale. So now I'm good to do an E major or an E sus2, 1, 2, 5, or a sus4, 1, 4, 5. But I have to know that scale first, or else I'm going to get really confused and be trying to do like that or that. Like there's a lot of ways that it can go wrong. But if you remember that scale, it's going to lock in very nicely. 1, 2, 5, 1, 4, 5. Now the way that we sort of use these sus chords is to create a sense of ambiguity or floating or lightness. And the reason that works is because there's no third. In other words, there's no way to tell if I'm in a major key or a minor key, because the third is what gives away whether a certain chord is major or minor. So for example, let's say I'm doing a C sus2. Well, I don't know if I'm in a C major scale, which has E natural, or if I'm in a C minor scale, which has E flat. Right? This chord is too ambiguous. It doesn't give us enough information to tell us whether we're in a major or a minor key. So it's really cool actually, we can do this in a sort of lighter sense with a major key behind it. Or I can do it with a minor key. Both ways are totally valid. Same thing with sus4. Here's sus4 in a major key. And here's sus4 in a minor key. And you get the idea. It's all about the context that that chord is taking place in. So it's very ambiguous, it's really cool, that's one of my favorites. Now with that said, we've covered all of our 6 different types of triads. We did major, which is 1, 3, and 5. We did minor, which is 1, flat 3, and 5. We did diminished, which is 1, flat 3, and flat 5. We did augmented, 1, 3, sharp 5. And then we did sus2, 1, 2, 5, and sus4, which is 1, 4, 5. Your action step for this video is to pick a white key, just because those are typically a little bit easier, and try to create each of those triads based on that white key. So for example, I might pick D, and then I'm going to go D major, D minor, D diminished, D augmented, D sus2, and D sus4. That's a great way to just drill those chords and really get the hang of them. And I should probably mention this isn't all of the chord types, this is just the triads. In other words, just the chords that use 3 notes. Once we get to 4 notes, there's a lot of other different chord types out there, but we're going to get to that as well in the advanced module. For now, just practice those triads.